I would like to thank you for choosing to celebrate this special moment with us today. As Dr. King once said, our life begins and ends the day we become silent about things that matter. This year's theme is Fulfilling the Dream, the pursuit of justice, honoring the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. This theme could not be more timely selected in light of the struggle for social justice and equality under the law. Know their names: George Floyd, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, and the list goes on. These are just a few of the African Americans whose lives were needlessly ended way too soon. It goes without challenge that Dr. King was an agent for change in a time that our community needed him the most. One of the things that I found most remarkable about Dr. King was whether he faced a small act of evil or a great injustice, he did not become bitter. He simply became more resolute. He was arrested more than 20 times and his home was bombed. But day after day, month after month, Dr. King continued to speak out against the injustice and suppression of African Americans. He continued to speak out about inequality, regardless of how much his words offended and angered others. In his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, Dr. King spoke of the hope for humanity. Dr. King is also noted for saying, "I have the audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals for their bodies, education, and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirit." Today, it is incumbent upon us to lift those high ideals of Dr. King and carry the torch of equality forward for ourselves and the generation of little black boys and girls to come after us. Today is not the day that we should become silent to the oppression of our people. Today is not the day that we can afford to resolve to silence on things that matter. Today is the day that we feed our minds and spirit with 3 meals a day for the perpetual growth of our dignity, equality, and freedom. Again, welcome, and I hope that you enjoy our inaugural Martin Luther King Justice Brunch.
Derrick Kayango and his family fled a civil war in Uganda and settled in the United States when he was just 10 years old. Now a successful entrepreneur, Kayango is a renowned expert in environmental sustainability and global health. As the founder of the Global Soap Project, which takes donated, melted, purified, and reprocessed hotel soap and redistributes it to vulnerable populations around the world. He is also the former CEO of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, which capitalizes on the immersive management and leadership experience he has developed over the last 20 years, working for Nobel Peace Prize winning organizations like Amnesty International and the American Friends Service Committee. Currently, there are 5,500 hotels that are members of the Global Soap Project Recycling Program in the United States alone. And the list of participating countries has recently expanded to 90. Global Soap recently partnered with Clean the World to make an even more expansive and effective program. Please join me in welcoming Derrick Kayango.
Our next hero survived unspeakable horrors, a civil war in Uganda and a refugee camp in Kenya. He then eventually arrived in America. Derrick Kayango landed in the city of brotherly love. He spent his first night in a hotel and was amazed by what he saw by the bathroom sink: soap. 3 kinds of it. face soap, hand soap, and body soap. And because of where he came from, he had no idea there were so many. So Derrick did what everybody does. He put a couple of bars in his bag. Next day, it had all been replaced. He quickly ran to the front desk, gave the bars back, and asked for his old soap. He thought they were charging him for it, and he couldn't afford it, of course. Then he realized what they were really doing. They were throwing it all away. And in that moment, Derrick had a life-saving idea.
I love speaking to people who have already eaten, because then they're not mean at you, trying to get you out of there so they can go eat. But I hate speaking to people who have eaten, because then they become lethargic. Because then they're so full, they are not. So don't be lazy today in your brain. We're going to have fun. I'm going to tell you a lot of things that are cool things. And then we'll get to the reason why we're here today, which is very humbling to be at a great university like yours at a very important time as we look at the life of a very important man in Martin Luther King. But I wanted to move a little bit away from that and just say it's not just Dr. King alone that we're celebrating. We're celebrating our efforts as Africans who have come and lived in a space that has been so tough. And look at what we've done. We've done well by all accounts. So I want us to celebrate ourselves and have a small moment of quietness to recognize the power of people like John Lewis and C.T. Vivian and all these women that supported the movement to get us to where we are. Because sometimes we forget that it's not just one person. It's a collection of so many people's efforts. So can we take just a few seconds and remember everybody who participated in making us what we are. Thank you. In 1979, my parents and I woke up to an incredible experience. We had gunshots out of the apartment that we lived in, and my father looked out the apartment and saw a soldier wielding an AK-47. And in Swahili, which is an amalgam of Bantu language and Arabic, he said the following: "Get out of your apartment right now, get out." He was so rude and rambunctious that my father looked at us and said, "Look, let's get out of the apartment, because if he comes into the apartment, he might kill us." So we get out of the apartment and we are hauled off to this roundabout station where we find an amazing scene. And it turns out they had actually gathered the whole village that we lived on and brought us to all this place, and therefore we are really waiting to hear what is going on. That's a man at a rostrum as big as that with a bullhorn said the following: "Last night, 2 of my soldiers were killed, and I'm here to figure out what happened to them. So we're going to have a firing squad until you tell me what happened last night." A firing squad. We were aghast at this particular accusation, because in any civilized society, what happens when a crime like that is committed? You investigate the crime, you police the crime. Well, he did not. And very quickly, as a matter of fact, pointed out 4 people at random. 1, 2, 3, 4, come up. And as they brought those 4 up to the front, he asked the question one more time, said, "Who killed those 2 men?" To no avail, he pulled out his magnum pistol and shot all 4 of them at once. Pa, 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 pa. The cacophony that ensued after that, as mothers held on to their children and screaming and everybody jumping all over the place, was unbearable. Because all of a sudden we realized that he was not kidding. He was very serious. He calmed us down by yelling out these epitaphs: "Be quiet, be quiet. We're going to do this all day until you tell me what happened to those 2 men." So as we simmer down, he picks up another 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, come up. And as he points at those 4, neighbors had to point at each other saying, "He picked you." Can you imagine right now your neighbor at your table, who you think is a friend, pointing at you and offering you to be executed? It's amazing what people will do when they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And so those 4 are brought up to the front against their will. He asked the question one more time. To no avail, those 4 gunshots rang out again. That was 8. Before he could pick up another 4, a young man at the very back ever so gently rose up his hand and whispered and yet sternly said, "I did it. I did it." And as we look back to see who this young man was, it turns out he was a visitor in the village, and there's no way he could have actually committed that crime. But he had offered himself to stop the killing. It's an amazing thing. While somebody's offering you to be executed, well, another one offers themselves at the greater good of society. So that young man is brought up to the front. There's banter between the two of them. And as I shut my eyes down, because I couldn't handle it anymore, that gunshot rang out again, and I could feel his body fall to the ground, at which point this reprobate of a man had the audacity to tell us, "Thank you so much for your cooperation. I hope this never happens again," and drove off in his motorcade, leaving us in shambles. ASU, I was 10 years old, watching adults who were supposed to protect and love us destroy not just my little village of Lubaga, but destroy a whole country. And at that age, I questioned the validity of adulthood. Who are these people? Who raises adults to become so violent against their environments and the milieu in which they reside? It took me a while to really understand what adulthood is all about. But I want you to park that grotesque picture for a second, because that picture led me to leave the country to become a refugee in Kenya. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I want to take you back a little bit, take a step back and wake you up out of your stupor and tell you who Derrick was before that event. I'm originally Ugandan. Who knows where Uganda is? Don't say Africa, because of course, come on. Uganda is a small, by the way, I asked that question in Santa Barbara not too long ago, and a young lady said, "Oh, I know where Uganda is." I said, "Darling, where's Uganda?" She said, "South of San Diego, near Mexico." This is why I don't trust American education at all. Americans, you guys suck at geography. You just suck at geography. Uganda is a small little country in the heart of we're East Africans. Let me see if I can move this. There it is. And it's the size of Oregon, but very populous. We have a population of about 45 million people. So we're very populous. And if you're following Africa's demographics, Africa is the fastest growing population globally. We're at 1.2, 1.3 billion now. In the next 50 to 100 years, Tanzania alone will have more population than the whole of Western Europe, out of the 55 countries. So we're growing really fast. That country has 45 million. Ugandans pride themselves in a lot of things. One of the things we pride ourselves in is that we're the source of the Nile. And we're linked directly to the development of Egypt. Now, of course, the Ethiopians think they're the source of the Nile too, because we have the Blue Nile and the what? And the White Nile. But they're not here to give the speech, so we are the source of the Nile. Number 2, we pride ourselves in being the best runners in the world. Marathon running is a big thing for us. Every time I see Americans running the marathon, the Boston Marathon, the New York Marathon, I'm like, oh, you're going to lose. The Kenyans are here, the Ugandans are here, and the Ethiopians are here. You guys can go to the moon, but leave the running to us. Number 3, we pride ourselves in some of the best fruit. Our pineapples, if you've never seen an African pineapple, or a Ugandan pineapple for that matter, the first time I saw a pineapple in the US, it was a supermarket, and it was so small. And I was like, oh, America, you can make a pineapple great again. Some of you get the joke. Okay, you get it. But that country was given back to us, if there's such a thing, by the Brits who had colonized us. And my parents were both teachers coming out of the colonial eras. And they were very happy about teaching, and then realized very quickly that teaching doesn't pay very well. I don't know, do teachers get paid very well in the U.S.? No, we need to do something about that because they are really important. And so my mom and dad decided, well, we're not going to wait to be paid well. We're going to do something about our lives. That self-gumption, that self-determination becomes their thing. They become entrepreneurs and start to morph from teaching to entrepreneurs right before my eyes. I was 5 years old as I saw my mom build a business at David's do you guys know what David's Bridal is? Yeah? So she built a David's Bridal from scratch. She taught herself how to sew and tailor. She became a seamstress and became a wonderful seamstress and built the second largest David's Bridal in our country. I joke all the time, and my son hates this joke, but it's a great joke for me. My son is at Xavier University, so he's like you guys. Right? That's why I'm very happy to be here, you know. So I tell my son this joke, and he says, "Dad, don't ever say that again." My mom did not have mannequins for flower girl dresses. So guess who the mannequin was? Which is why I dress better than any American man you'll ever meet. We tease American men. We say American men suck. They will just wake up and put on, sweatshops or whatever, and go to, either the gym or to a wedding. Don't do that. My father, on the other hand, became a soap maker. We're going to talk about soap in a minute. And together, they built the second largest businesses in our country and became very, very well-to-do. And I ended up going to private schools. I was enjoying I had a chauffeur. It was unbelievable. And then guess who comes into power? Idi Amin. If you haven't watched Forrest Whitaker in that movie, The Last King of Scotland, you should go watch it. In fact, I think he won an Oscar for it. He did very well in it. Idi Amin, and he had a son called Moses, and he and I sat next to each other in class. And he actually was so offended by several things. One, he hated religious people. Idi Amin hated Christians because he was not of that persuasion. He hated wealthy men and women because he thought they were anti-him. He hated intellects because he had a third-grade education, and he thought that every time they spoke fluently, that they were actually making fun of him. He thought there was something supercilious about intellectuals against him. So those three categories he killed. He killed the first Archbishop of our country. He killed Benjamin Netanyahu's brother, if you know the Prime Minister of Israel. He shot him point blank. He did remarkable things. He attacked Tanzania. He did a lot of crazy things. He hated Jews, could not stand Jews. Just horrible man. That guy comes into power, and all the success my parents had actually built is held captive. He captures my dad and imprisons him. My dad is a born vegetarian, not like you guys who are fancy vegetarians who decide, today I'm going to be vegetarian. No, he's like totally vegetarian. If he eats meat, he's in hospital the next day. As his form of torture, he's the only prisoner in Uganda who was fed meat. He had hives every time I went to see him in jail. And so that is how we end up at that particular spot of that grotesque picture of firing squads. But let me show you do you want to see who Derrick looked like back in the day? And my parents? That's Uganda. That's the source of the Nile. We should go. That's me. I know. I love you too, darling. I have two photographs left after the war of me and my parents, and that's the first one. That's Lake Victoria and my dad's boats. And then these are my parents, mom and dad. I bring up these photographs to tell you something really important. Having a good mom and dad is a gift. And not all of us have that gift. So if you do have a mom and dad, be thankful for them. Because not everybody has a chance to have a father and a mother present at all times. Many of you, as Americans especially, Americans read a lot of self-help books, yeah? 7 Habits of what? Highly effective people. Just 7? 5 ways of sales, 5 ways of that. Well, in Africa, the number one inspiring thing about anything about us is family. And I know that the joke out there was that when Hillary Clinton one time said it takes a family to do what? A village to raise a child. People made fun of that. But it does take a village. And so as we think about this day, there's no way we can do any of the things that have been done without the village. And the village starts with those 2. Because without them, what I'm going to tell you in the next few minutes would have never happened. Never happened. So for me, when the people ask me, who is your hero and who are the people that you look up to, it's my mom and dad. They're so important to me. And so these 2 lose everything and go from being very wealthy to a refugee camp. So fast forward back to that grotesque picture that we talked about. My dad takes me to Nairobi, Kenya, to be raised by an American woman and a Brit, and goes back to fight Idi Amin. Those of you who know a little bit of my story, if you've Googled me, my dad was a spy for 15 years and did an incredible job because he ended up, when the war ended, becoming the head of our CIA back at home. In Kenya, I'm introduced to Marge Campbell, a lady from Pittsburgh, a missionary, to raise me. And the first time I meet her, how many have ever met Americans before? What about Americans from Pittsburgh? They're ridiculous, rambunctious. Marge comes out, because Americans are very loud and obnoxious, and they move fast, yeah? So the first time Marge busts into the living room and she says, "What's up, Derrick?" And I'm like, oh, good God. Hello, Marge. She says, "Can I interest you in a cup of tea?" I said, "Oh, darling, that would be lovely." So she runs back into the kitchen, brings a cup of tea, and goes back into the kitchen. So I take the cup of tea, I take a sip of it. It was cold. Faux pas. I set it back down, and she comes back and she does what American women from Pittsburgh do, which I hope you guys know is what they do. And she does this. "What's wrong?" I said, "Darling, I think you forgot to cook the tea." She says, "Young man, that's American iced tea. You should love it." And that began our friendship over iced tea. Now I love iced tea, but before then I was like, oh my God, really? Marge and I became friends. She taught me a lot about American culture, and she said, "Derrick, you've got to go to the U.S. And so I was moved to the U.S. and ended up landing in the city of brotherly love. What city is that? Philadelphia. Where they eat what? Cheesesteaks. What is that? So I get there and I land in the city of brotherly love. I get into this hotel. The rooms were copacetic. Oh my goodness. I mean, the pillowcases were fluffy and white linen and everything. I was like, good God, this is fantastic. So I go into the bathroom and I'm scouting around, and in the bathroom there were 3 bars of soap. Facial soap, body soap, and hand washing soap. What's the difference? I love Americans, man. You guys are something else, man. There's no difference, because my father made soap, okay? I know something about soap. It's Americans being bougie. Because my dad never said, "Hey, Derrick, do not use your butt soap in your face. Don't use your face soap with your butt." Who does that? Soap is soap. So I'm like, okay, I'm African, whatever. I'll take the 2 bars, put them in the bag for another day. I come back that evening, and what do you think they're done? More soap. Okay, I'm African, I'll steal the heck out of it. Boom. But for 3 days, I'm stealing soap. Now you're laughing, but I know some of you. How many of you have stolen soap from hotels? Oh, I can't. Really? You guys know. We're talking about stealing stuff, and we have a pastor here, so Pastor, we should have another prayer for forgiveness for my fellow thieves over here. But then I realized they're going to charge me for the soap. I don't have enough quid on me, so I'm going to take it back and give it back. So I take the soaps that I had stolen back downstairs to give them to the concierge to give them back. When I get downstairs, the concierge was African American. I had never seen African Americans before in my entire life. My only experience with African Americans was through the movie Coming to America with Eddie Murphy. Because how many of you have ever met African Americans before? I mean, if you've never met African Americans, you should meet them. African Americans are so cool. I mean, the guys especially are so cool. The first time I met this guy, he was, concierge, elegant. But, African American men are so elegant, it's unbelievable. You try and go globally and say you're African American men. You will see that they'll be like, oh my God, we love you. Even the way they walk. African American men, when they walk, the first time I saw an African American man walk, I was like, what the heck is going on? I mean, who walks in rhythm like this? Hey, what's up, brother? What's up? Who does that? The rest of us are walking. But you have even a rhythm thing going? I mean, it's unbelievable. So I go up to him and I'm dying to say to him, what's up, brother? Because I was dying to say that. So I walk up to him, I said, what's up, brother? He's like, what's up, young man? I said, well, I have a secret for you. He says, what? I say, I've been stealing your soap. He's like, what? Like from housekeeping? I said, no, you keep on bringing me soap. I can't afford it. Take it back to housekeeping. Tell them not to charge me for it. He burst out laughing. He said, are you African? Are you Nigerian? Because you guys all think we're Nigerians. What is up with that? Are you Nigerian? Come on, man. There's 55 countries in Africa. Nigeria is a small, well, they're the largest population, 250 million. Can you imagine? That's why you see Nigerians everywhere. They're 250 million. Okay? They're not a joke. Oi, oi, oi. Now, you see, 1 Ugandan, 4 Nigerians. It's like, come on, give me a break. Okay? So he's bantering back at me. He's making fun of me. I'm making fun of him. He says, no, Derrick, don't worry about the soap. It's already priced into your bill, so don't worry about it. So I said, okay, fine. And as I walk away from him, a thought comes to mind. What about the partially used bars? What do you do? Because I can't imagine you throwing that stuff away. He says, no, as soon as you open the box, legally, in the U.S., you're supposed to do what? Get rid of it. So I said, my goodness, just this hotel or every hotel in the U.S.? He says, legally, every hotel in the U.S., once you open that little box, you throw it out. So here's where we always say that opportunity never follows a lazy mind. Okay? Here is where the question before me was, can we do something about that waste? And the answer was yes. So rather than sit on my laurels and just say, oh, okay, Americans are wasteful, I decided to do something about it. So we're going to walk you through in a few minutes here of what I did, because it's today's word to you is to really self-determine and understand that the fact that you're in this school learning, we expect you to take that education to do things around the world that are important. You're not here to just learn for the sake of learning and to go buy a BMW and then die. That's not what you're here for. You're here to be part of a global discussion with other students at Emory, at Harvard, at Tufts, and so that you can come together and solve problems with justice and equality. So what did we do? Before we do that, how many of you know how many bars of soap are thrown away annually by American hotels? Come up with a number in your brain. That's my bathroom sink, the hotel I was in. That's a little bar of soap. And the idea was how many bars are thrown away annually? 100 million, 2 million. That's the bars, those are the soaps, okay? And here's the number. $800 million bars of soap are thrown away annually. Mathematically, that is 2.6 million bars of soap every day. In juxtaposition, we lose about 2 million kids every year globally to poor hygiene. We, if you're a woman in this room, think about this. We lose about 500,000 women every year to poor maternal health. In other words, just imagine being in a refugee camp or somewhere in a natural disaster situation, and you're pregnant and you have to deliver a child, and a midwife goes into your womb without washing their hands, and they deliver that child and leave a germ in your womb called childbed fever that kills you in 2 weeks and kills the child in 3 weeks. Now we're talking about COVID. I've never found my work so relevant as I find it today. Because what is the first line of defense against COVID? Wash your hands. And so, when you see that number, if you're a regular person who is not concerned about being part of innovation, entrepreneurship, and being part of solutions, I would have been very easily, as an African, I could have easily said, how wasteful Americans are. And I would have been in my own right. But what would have been a much more criminal thing to do is for me to just complain and not be part of a solution. Because we have a lot of complainers out there. They complain about everything, but they're never in the business of being part of the solution. Try being part of the solution. You'll fail too. You'll make mistakes. Don't make fun of somebody making mistakes when they're trying to solve a problem. Because in making mistakes is how we learn, and eventually we get there. But the person who doesn't try at all, that's the one we have problems with. And so I look at that number, and here's the journey. The first thing that I faced was the yak factor. Everybody I told about recycling soap, my son included, his owner said, yak? Because let's be honest, come on, the elephant in the room, you're going to take somebody, use the soap a little bit, and then you're going to do it, recycle it, and then give it to somebody else. Yak. That was the first thing I faced. But indeed, everything has a yak factor. Everything. You try and solve any problem, there's a yak factor to it. For me, it was germs. And the Center for Disease Control said to me, Derrick, if you want us to give you permission to recycle soap, prove to us scientifically that you have killed all the germs on the soap without altering the chemistry of the soap. That's the equation. That's the question. Okay? So, what do you do if you're a former student of ASU? Do you walk away and say, that's too hard? Or do you go back and understand that when you're doing geometry and when you're doing fractions and when you're doing physics and chemistry, that everything was actually based on what? Research, understanding, investigation, failure. That's why you're here. To understand that whoever came up with mathematics, Isaac Newton, with kinetics, he spent time thinking about these things. So I had to sit down and think about the yak factor. So what do you think I did to kill the germs on the soap without altering the chemistry of the soap? I washed them. Washing is good, but let's look at all the other sciences that come with that particular idea. So washing soap would be perfect, but an accountant, any accountants in the room? Anybody doing accounting? Okay. The problem there would be, for an accountant, that the utility cost of washing 800 million bars of soap puts the bar of soap out of the reach of what? Affordability. So good idea, but not so good for the accountant. So the answer there is, What else do you think I did? Melted it. What else do you think you're running into with the accountant? The cost of melting it. Good idea, but the cost. I tried that. I melted it. I tried it. It became so expensive. So here's what I did. I had to go back and look at all the other things that surround germs. What are germs? So we had to define what are germs. Germs are like you and I. They eat people, and procreate. So they need what? Oxygen. They need food, all that stuff. So what we have to do is to interrupt their what? Their feeding cycle. And to interrupt it, it turns out there's a guy who had invented this contraption where if you want to preserve meat for a longer period of time, even if it's in the fridge, you put it in a Ziploc bag and suck out what? Seal it and suck out what? The air. And what do you create? A vacuum. Germs like you hate vacuums. So that's what we did, is we bought these big industrial bags, crushed the soap, put it into these bags, sucked the air out, and waited for 2 weeks. We went to the lab and we tested the soap, and there's not a single germ left alive. That is Chemistry 101 and Biology 101. Don't underestimate your classes, man. They will come in handy. So the first thing you do, you peel the first layer that you used. Those are volunteers. Then you crush the soap into a powder. We're going to ziplock that. Then after 2 weeks, you're awake. That was my first contraption from Home Depot. It's a cement mixer, for those of you who don't know what that is. And what we're doing there is we're working the soap, because it's so dry, we have to add a little bit of moisture into it to create a feta cheese texture kind of thing. And then that is what we then push together through this machine. As it warms it up just a little bit to put it back in together into form, it comes out to look like this. That is 1 day's work by the University of Michigan students that came to volunteer at the factory. And then, of course, fashion with Derrick. Those boxes have about 160 bars of soap. If you give them to a family of 4, it will last them for a whole year. Because if you're trying to fight germs and diseases, you can't just give them a bar of soap for a week. It has to be a continuous process, and you have to teach hygiene all the way. And then we are getting ready to close up here, but that's a 40-foot container, and it's going to Liberia, because at the time there was a big disease in Liberia. Who can guess what that was? Ebola. Okay? And the way to fight Ebola is, again, what? Sanitation, hand washing. And so we get to Africa, and we are in Haiti, we are everywhere. What do American mamas say when you give them a gift? Thank you. Have you ever seen an African mama say thank you before? Can I show you? This is what they say. And they dance and ululate. That's ululation. Eh? It's a very typical African thing. They ululate, they dance, and if you're lucky, they give you their daughter to marry. I have 5,000 wives sprinkled all over Africa, because I have had every mother say, here is you should marry her. You know, and they name their children after your name. You know, there are Derricks everywhere out there. I told that joke in Utah, it did not go very well. Utah's a great state. Here's the soap. Boys love soap. Am I right? No. Boys hate soap. They never wash their hands. Which is why in Africa, in most cultures, we don't shake hands. We just say, Namaste, do not touch me, you bloody bastard, do not touch me. But girls do what? Love soap. And this photograph, I love this photograph because many of you see African children looking horrible on TV. You see the worst photograph of us. But when you walk with them and you do things that are remarkable around them, that's what they look like. Beautiful colors. They're going to become lawyers and doctors. And for me, that entry into that conversation of bringing dignity to a child is through a bar of soap. Because girls drop out of school because boys make fun of them because of what? Poor hygiene. Now you can imagine those girls smelling like a Bulgari, a Venda, and all these beautiful soaps. That's the bringing of dignity that we're talking about. That in your work, as you finish school and you go to do remarkable things, remember to bring dignity in society. My work brings dignity to these kids. Let me close here. This is a girl washing her hands. I love that. The boy has to be taught. The girl is having fun with the soap. And they give you a child too, if you're lucky. All those kids want to come back with me to the States. You eat with them, and we are eating with our hands. that's our culture back at home. Not that so much that we don't have forks and everything, but to touch our food and, man, huh? Hey, very nice. This is in a village where Barack Obama's father was born, and they're asking me about Barack and whether he was doing a good job. And I said, I think he is, and they're very proud of him, very, very proud of him. So that's his village. And that's the school that we targeted. That's the number of countries we're in. Let me finish with, before we go into Q&A, with something important to think about. I asked myself, what should I do to leave a legacy behind as Derrick Kayango? Because the gift I got to be in this country meant that a lot was required of me. I got a scholarship by a gentleman who had never met me before. And he said, Derrick, if you get a good GPA, I'll pay for your school for 4 years. I got the scholarship. I went to one of your elite schools in Boston, and the scholarship was $56,000 every year. When somebody gives you that investment, it behooves you to understand the power of that investment. And what is important about that investment, it means that he wants or she wants you to do what? Use that investment to do remarkable things. And many of us get that investment from government, because now I know that people get scholarships from everywhere, and people don't understand that investors are important. The investment is important. So for me, I had to come up with a doctrine. What's the Derrick doctrine of life? I don't have to read anybody else's book, because I know who I am. Nobody knows who I am except Derrick. I know my weaknesses, I know my strength, I know things that threaten me, I know my opportunities. I don't need to read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People to do my work. I have to wake up in the morning determined and intentionally determined to do something remarkable. So for me, this is my doctrine. Self. Everything begins with me. I have to wake up in the morning to go wash myself, to go to work on time. I don't need the government to tell me that. I don't need Miss So-and-so to tell me that. No, Derrick, it all starts with you. So what is self? It's an acronym. Here. Service. You have to serve in your community. Learn how to serve in your community. You know why? Because it's not just a Calvinistic thing about being an American, but it is exactly how this country was built. Are you guys familiar with the Amish people? When something happens in their community, guess what? They all serve together and rebuild it. I love the Mormon community in Utah. I make fun of Utah all the time, but I love their doctrine. When a Mormon child graduates from high school, they leave school and take a gap year, 2 gap years. You know what they're doing? Serving. That's how Mitt Romney learned French. He went and served in the community and learned a new language. Learn how to serve, because when you serve, you learn, you get educated on the needs of the community. That's the E. You can tell somebody who has served because they know what is going on in the community. That's why your pastor is here. He could have been doing something else. He's here in service to you. Because the more he knows about your condition, his preaching becomes more relevant to the condition. If he doesn't know what the condition is, he will just talk about how graceful God is. Well, we don't know how graceful he is because he's not graceful for us here. My education had to be relevant, but I had to serve first and get educated. Because if you do those 2 things, service and education, then you can become a legitimate leader. Leadership is not something you're born with it. You've got to have street cred. You've got to have put in some time. Service, education makes leaders. And a leader who has no faith, I'm not talking just spiritual faith, but who has no faith in themselves. Have faith in yourself. You can do it. If a young boy from Africa can come over here and build a global business, What pretext do you have? What is your excuse? You have electricity every day. You have water every day. You have roads every day. You have things that kids in South Asia don't have. And guess what? They're taking over all American businesses. Look at the CEO of Apple, the CEO of Google. They're Indian kids. You know why? Because they have faith in who they are, regardless of what you call them. Have faith in yourself. If you do those things, here's your quote for you today as you go back into your lives. I'm not asking you to seek perfection. And I know some of you think you're perfect. Good luck for you. Nobody's what? Perfect. But what we're looking at is to seek balance. Be balanced as a human being. Too much of everything is what? As somebody said, moderation including what? Moderation itself. Okay? Don't be too extreme. Center yourself. Be healthy. Exercise. Do a crossword puzzle. Watch a movie. But working 16 hours a day doesn't prove to us anything. You're going to kill yourself. Work smart. Be thoughtful. Spend time every weekend and spend those 2 hours to say, who is Derrick? What am I on the right path? And you know why? Because I've lived here for a long time and I know about American culture. You guys are constantly moving. Boom, 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 boom. I mean, you guys are so busy. It's okay to be bored a little bit. Okay? Relax. Spend time and think about your life a little bit. You don't have to be told to go to a retreat and no. I spend 2 hours every weekend rather. Saturday is my day. And I step back and say, how did the week go, Derrick? I check in with Derrick. How did the week go? What did you do with yourself? You shouldn't have done that. Maybe we should revise that. How many of you have that conversation with yourself at least a week? Every week. Learn to do that. Consistency. Especially for you as upcoming students, you have to learn being consistent. Because the more consistent you are, the more we entrust our lives with you. Inconsistency, lack of predictability, sometimes you're on time, sometimes you're not, your homework is late, you have an excuse, That's not on the professor. That is going to show up at work when you get a job. Being late is not a good thing. Be consistent. Seek justice. Whatever you do, seek justice. Always. At work, at home, everywhere. Seek justice. Because if we're not just to each other, we end up in conflicts. I looked at the Second World War and First World War. Do you know how many people died during those two wars because somebody was trying to make a point? 74 million. What point was made? Just tell me, what was the point for 74 million people to die? Seek passion. As you can tell, I have a lot of passion. Never run out of passion. I say to friends of mine, I said, do you remember the book, The Purpose-Driven Life? The guy who wrote the book was a friend of mine. Well, he's still a friend of mine. He's a pastor. And I said to him, hey, look, purpose is important, but without passion, it's like having a Bentley without gas. Many of you have a purpose, yeah? You say, I have a purpose, I have my purpose. But you don't have the what? And my goodness, it's horrible to see a human being who has no passion. How was the day? It was good. What's going on in your life? Well, you know, it's so. What? Get away from me. Because if you do those things, your life shall have meaning. And today we celebrate Martin Luther King's life because it had what? Meaning. It was not an easy life. He paid for that life with death. But maybe sometimes that's needed. to prove a point. And his point was very simple. Injustice here is injustice everywhere. Thank you very much.